Hi, my name is Craig Collins, and welcome to the What the Warehouse Show. With us on the line is Zale. He's from Local Grown Salads. Thanks for being here, Zale.
Thank you for having me.
Zale, please give our viewers around the world the elevator pitch about your company. What do you do, and who are your customers?
Okay, so we are an indoor vertical farming manufacturing company. So that's core of what we do. We've developed our own indoor vertical farming technology. On top of that, we own our own farms. So they are branded by our names. And then we also sell our equipment to third parties, so it becomes a private label farm. So Craig wants to open up a farm and wants to call it Craig's Fancy Foods. He would use our technology, our software, our hardware, and can operate the farm, but it would be called Craig's. And it would follow our procedures or choose not to as he feels. So those are kind of things. And when we say indoor vertical farming, a lot of people start to think greenhouses or stuff like that. In your mind, you need to think of a warehouse. That's why we're on a warehouse show, right? Think something built in the early 1900s, right? Or brand new building, whatever you prefer. And the lights, the air conditioning, everything is totally enclosed and fits into that existing building.
Right. So do you, if let's for argument's sake, say I have an old warehouse building and I think this is a great business opportunity. Do you basically come in and are you looking to buy the building? Are you looking to rent from us? Are you looking for us to run it? What is your approach?
We currently don't want to buy any buildings. We're looking for partners. So let's say you own that building. We could provide you the entire operation. You could choose to operate it, or you could hire us under a management contract and we'll operate it for you. And like typical warehouse, once a month you'll get a check with the profits. First, you get your profits from the business renting the warehouse, of course, which is ultimately what you want. And then you get a check from the profits from the indoor vertical farming.
Wow. Okay. And where are you currently set up? What are you in multiple states and where are your
No,
farms?
currently we're operating in Philadelphia. We have a farm up and running, and people are more than welcome to come and visit us and see us. We're actually in an old since I'm going to keep talking about warehouses because I think that's something your clients want about. It's an old building. I think it was built in the 1930s, 40s, because it's got those columns that are 36 inches around,
Oh, yeah.
right? It was 250,000 square feet. So relatively low ceilings, the joists are fairly low. Anyways, that's where we're in. And we're also now opening up a second farm, which is an example of a private label farm in South Carolina. And what those folks did, they took an old church and they're renovating this old church and they're putting our farm in the church. So the church is interesting from a warehouse point of view because don't think of it as a church. Think of it as a building built probably in the 70s. It's got columns and it's got beams, and the beams are 9'6", and the column, is half a dozen columns in the building, and we're,
Right.
we're able to build around it.
Okay. So, a number of our customers are in Brooklyn, and a lot of those Brooklyn warehouses are really interesting because they're basement level, also sort of 9 foot tall, lots of columns and lots of weird spaces. And
Well,
the guys are moving from there out to New Jersey, leaving those warehouses empty.
right. So 9 foot we can't handle. We can handle 9'6".
Yeah. Okay.
So okay, it's a subtle difference, but that 6 inches means that 9'6" is really what the lowest we can go.
Okay.
But our technology is designed for those buildings. We actually started with the idea of going into opportunity zones. A lot of these buildings. So for example, we're in Philadelphia. There's property sitting empty for 25 years, and nobody can figure out what to do with it. Meanwhile, we can turn it into a building producing $200 a square foot revenue. So
Wow.
yeah. So your fellow in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
like to meet him. We could
Yeah.
talk about how we can get up and running in that space.
That's fascinating. And what's the length of time that it takes you to get one of these farms established?
Well, right now, because we have to manufacture all the equipment, it probably takes 3 to 4 months for us to manufacture. So if we get an order today, 3 to 4 months later, we can have the equipment, we can install it. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks before the first food is harvested, and then the
Sure.
revenue flow starts at that point.
It's incredible. I'm loving this concept. Tell me, I mean, from a business perspective, are you seeing growth yet? You seeing a lot of interest?
Well, I'm growing plants. Of course, I'm seeing growth every day. Yeah. Yeah, no, but seriously, we're fielding a lot of conversations because the food supply chain is a problem.
Yes.
For example, in Philadelphia, people are flying in basil from South America. We can grow basil. I think you mentioned that you have some food distributors
Yep.
in your market. So we can actually grow the basil. We can harvest it, and we can harvest it the same day. So they have no supply chain problems, and our price matches or is better than what's in the terminal. And we give them a fixed price over 365 days a year. So instead of you may not know this about the food business or the fresh food business, but the price goes up in the summer and goes down in the winter, or the other way, depending on what the products are. We're like a can of corn. You give us a contract, that's the price for a year. It's a fixed price for the
Yeah.
entire year.
So how modular are these things? I mean, if you've got a relatively small space, can you put something in as well, or is it?
Yeah. Our units are about 1,500 to 2,000 square foot, depending on where your columns are and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but at some point, we're selling a very low, while it's a very profitable business, it's also a very low margin business, and it's a volume business. So
Sure.
a typical pound of basil, be anywhere to $5 to $7 $5 to $7 a pound. So you
Right.
need a lot of pounds to make money. So you need a lot of space. So the minimum we kind of recommend is you should be looking at around 5,000 square feet or more to be profitable. And the margins, just a guy running it, you got to pay a guy to run the place,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So he needs to make a salary. If a typical plant manager salary, you need to spread it across that
Um,
many more pounds of vegetables.
sure. And I mean, I see a lot of leafy green type of stuff on your website, but what other vegetables can you grow in?
So we actually recommend that people start with herbs. Herbs are
Right.
very, very well. We actually sell microgreens, which
Right.
are very profitable, but the volume is very low. Mostly high-end restaurants like microgreens. They also take up a lot of space to grow. The next thing is herbs, and we recommend everybody gets into business. You go into the business with herbs, and you do a little microgreens on the side. Greens are a higher volume, a lower margin, and then we do small vegetables, so peas, beans, any of those kinds of things. We don't do watermelons, we don't do melons, we don't do mushrooms. So again, I ran through them very quickly. So microgreens are the low volume, high margin. Herbs are higher volume, lower margins. Greens are again, the volume goes up and the margins go down, and then you have small vegetables, which are the highest volume and the lowest margins. And
Right.
you really want, as a business, a mix of that, because and you put it together. But depending on how big your facility is what you'll start with. We
Okay.
100% recommend start with herbs.
Okay.
Basils, arugula, things like that.
So, and what are the sort of outside requirements? I mean, obviously, there's a water requirement.
Yep.
Um, yeah, you don't need light because you provide your own internal lighting, right?
We only need light. We need electricity, and we
Yeah.
need water. The water actually is not as much as you would think, because we recapture the water with our HVAC systems. We bring in the entire HVAC, or like I said, everything is kind of a turnkey system. So let's say Craig comes to me and says, "I want to do this deal," right? I love it. So we'll walk in there and say, you need to put food grade flooring in, which is essentially paint,
Sure.
right? So it's expensive, but you put it in. You need to give us power. We use standard power, so you need to have enough power coming into the building. It's a
Yep.
warehouse. If it's an old manufacturing place, it for sure
Yep.
will have the power. It's a warehouse, it may or may not. And then we just have you put in plugs. We tend to like off the shelf plugs. We use just your standard 30 amp GFSI, and that's it. And everything else we provide.
Incredible. That's amazing. Tell me, what technologies do you use? Obviously, you've got, technology in your HVAC systems and things like that, but do you use any other real interesting technologies?
Oh yeah, we have an entire software management system that tracks food all the way from the seed until the plate. We actually have apps that our clients can use. Let's say the private label, they can private label it, and you have an app to give to the consumer. So you can do that, distribute. In the food business, it's incredibly important that you can do traceability.
Yeah.
And so we can do traceability all the way from the seed down to the plate. We look at food safety and that traceability as a competitive advantage to the other technologies out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's amazing. And because you've got the entire supply chain sorted out, it's fairly easy to do.
Right, right. So from the operating farm takes what we call the seed. We have these technology. It's just a seed cartridge. It doesn't look, but conceptually it's the same as a printer cartridge. You have enough gray hair to remember the days when you couldn't print a color printer at home, right? But now you could, and basically it's the these cartridges you put into the cartridge. So we like to think of our indoor vertical farms as the mentally as the equivalent of a printer. You have these seed cartridges that come in, and you have plants that come out, harvesting that comes out. So the actual facility basically puts these cartridges into the place. The software makes sure it all runs, and the people that work there don't really need expertise on operating a farm, but they need to be able to follow our procedures. Right. Similarly to like a McDonald's, you walk into a McDonald's, the guy who's flipping the hamburgers is not a chef. He's been trained how to flip hamburgers.
Yeah.
Right. That's all he knows how to do, and we operate with the same kind of a philosophy of the McDonald's philosophy.
This is fascinating. So obviously then the seed cartridges are tracked, and you know then which product came from that batch of seeds, and
exactly.
That's how you track it right the way through.
And I know that Craig was the guy that was doing the harvesting.
Yeah.
And when it was grown and how long it was there, and if you have somebody doing something inappropriate to our equipment itself all the way is also isolated. So we isolate we isolate 56 cartridges. The numbers don't really matter, but conceptually we isolate the cartridges to the water. So if we have a problem with the water, we only lose 56 cartridges. We don't lose the entire place. People in the marijuana business will know what I'm talking about. They'll have an entire crop lost, and they'll lose $1 million overnight because they've got some disease because the water is shared. We have an isolation on the water, then we have an isolation in the room of air. So typical 20,000 square foot will have 5 or 6 rooms. So you've now got an isolation that way as well. So there's whole levels of isolation and protection against insects. There's no pesticides, no herbicides, no insecticides.
All organic, all clean.
Exactly.
It's amazing. And I mean, that's where you get a price premium at the moment, and everyone.
We don't actually sell the price premium because our goal is to be ubiquitous. I love that word, ubiquitous. I couldn't spell it, but I love to say it. Right? Our goal is to roll out as many farms as we possibly can. So we're not after those short-term profits. We're after getting into as many locations. So if you have your fellow in Brooklyn that owns 20 buildings, we would love to talk to him.
And tell me, I mean, if you've got a multi-floor building, because you only need 9'6", you can actually put this on multiple floors as well.
So, but we treat each one as a separate farm because of that isolation thing. But essentially for sure. Yeah, or if you have a 30, the other option is if you have a building that's 30 feet high, like from floor to rafters, you can put 2 levels into the same building.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking, apartment buildings in cities that are a lot of the time now, with people have moved out of the cities have got spare space, and apartment buildings are available. Yeah.
Well, actually, where I'm thinking is there's a lot of office space that's becoming available.
Yeah.
Right. Office space is right downtown. It's well located. They tend to have 12 or 14 foot high ceilings. Yeah. Right. And they'd be a great, the only issue is the elevator, but if they have a service elevator, you're good because you have pallets of food that you're moving.
So, this is a fascinating business. I'm totally intrigued by it. What are your international aspirations? I mean, are you see this as something that you're going to take global?
Oh, of course. We've already had a number of conversations with people in the GCC countries. I have a kind of priority in my, like North America, of course, is where we are. I'm Canadian. We want to do America. We want to get North America done. I'd like to go after the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. I really, really want to go to Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of rich people there. It's a big country,
Yeah.
and they have a food import problem. And
Right.
then I probably go. We've talked to. It's an interesting country is Nigeria, it's a huge country, huge population. They used to be food sufficient, and then because of the oil, things moved away from that. So it turns out that they're importing food,
Yes.
right? And then of course there's Europe, which is also big. But I like rich countries that have lots of money that have bring in their food and import their food.
Cool.
And back to the United States for a second. People in Pennsylvania don't realize that they're importing their food from California, right? Or they're importing. It's when you move the food 2,000 miles,
Yeah.
it's the same as moving food from Spain to England, which just
Exactly.
happens on a daily basis. Or as I mentioned right at the beginning, or mentioned earlier, I was talking to somebody in Netherlands the other day. They're moving strawberries from Ethiopia to the Netherlands to service the Netherlands.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. It's amazing these supply chains and how rapidly we can move product. I did some work in Africa where they were growing things like high quality peas and beans and things like that, and packaging it in Kenya and in Botswana and shipping it to Europe. And it was literally on the supermarket shelf within something like 36 hours of having been picked.
Right. But if those folks in Europe were using our technology, they
Yeah.
would be 2 hours.
Exactly, and this is what's exciting is I can see retail chains that sell like Whole Foods actually just having a warehouse close by and
Right.
servicing local. I mean, that just makes so much sense.
So there are people who are actually starting to do that right now. So I don't really consider other indoor vertical farming companies as my competition because where the industry is very, very beginning. The real competition is traditional food farms. So I like to talk about what my competition is doing. So one of our competitors has actually put on GFS. GFS is a big, national distributor of food. People in the food industry know who GFS is, but other people would not. So GFS is a massive, Gordon Food Systems, and the competitor is actually putting their indoor vertical farms physically on site at GFS. So GFS is picking up the food right there, putting
Yeah,
it in, and moving it out. There is a company in Texas who actually is putting indoor vertical farm on the roof of one of their retail stores. It's not Whole Foods. It's
yeah,
sorry, I can't remember the name. The very big East Texas chain
yeah,
is very high quality food.
yeah. So it's been fascinating. We have to wrap up, but I could definitely talk to you again. And
No
the
problem.
ideas in my head are just running wild, on top of warehouses, on top of retail stores, apartment blocks. I mean, I just, from South Africa, from Cape Town, I can just see this being everywhere. You go to places like Singapore, the number of people in the city compared to the ability to produce greens in the city, it just doesn't make sense. And
Right?
I really see apartment buildings as being and office blocks as being a big market. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to throw it in, if somebody's building a new building now, you could put it in the basement.
Yeah.
Right? We don't need to be on the. Everybody thinks, oh, why don't you put it on the roof? Why not
Yeah.
put it in the basement where you need to deal? To dig down is cheaper than to add another floor,
Sure. Sure.
right? So we're actually talking to people who are doing public housing and bringing it as part of a public housing deal as
Wow.
well. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of there are a million ideas.
Sure. I'm
This is
sure.
great.
Yeah, fantastic. So just so that our audience can find information about your company, what's the best way to get hold of your company?
The company is Local Grown Salads. We're
Yeah.
very large on LinkedIn. I'm posting on LinkedIn on a regular basis. So that simplest way to get hold of me is on LinkedIn. Yeah, and then just Google you have a friend in Google.
Okay, brilliant. And then So, last question. You're obviously dealing with a number of these food distributors, and I will definitely start spreading the word in amongst
Thank you.
the contacts I've got with food distributors. But can you recommend anyone else who might be a good interview for the show?
Oh, for your show,
Yeah.
opportunity zones. You should be talking to folks all about opportunity zones. It's a tax benefit in the United States. You're familiar with opportunity zones or not
I'm
really?
not. I actually saw it in your mail to me, and I've made a note
Okay.
to look it up. Yeah.
I'll give you the 10-second. The opportunity zone is a tax credit business, tax benefit. So if you have um, capital gains and you put the capital gains into an investment that's in an opportunity zone, so it's a physical location, right? In any of these old places that we're talking about or poorer areas of the city, and basically every state has 25% of them. You put your money in there, you get a discount on your capital gains, what you owe, and if you keep it for a few years as well, you get to any capital gains that you make on that investment are tax free. That's the tax deal part of it. But what happens in reality is opportunity zones are now being treated by both the city and the state and the federal for any programs that you want to run. So if you're doing something in an opportunity zone, there's probably a tax credit that works for you.
Mm.
Um, so it, talk to Philadelphia. There's a piece of property, $1.5 million. It's about 4 acres. It's got 6 buildings, and it's sitting empty in an opportunity zone. So somebody's got some dry powder that is capital gains, and you have years to spend it and make that money. And so that's how it fits with indoor vertical farming.
Okay.
I recommend that you get talk to people about opportunity zones. Everybody always thinks it's a real estate business. It's actually just any business. So if you're setting up a business and you're putting capital gains into it, you got to set it up in an opportunity zone because you might as
Amazing.
well take a tax credit.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you for that. I'm sure that that will definitely be a topic on another show to come,
Sure
and
thing.
will be of real interest to a number of people that are watching this. Thanks very much. I really appreciate your time,
Thank you,
and
Craig.
yeah, we'll wrap it up there.